Good afternoon, all. I don't even ask that question anymore about how many mistakes we made, because everybody makes mistakes every day. Not just during these days, but those mistakes are not who you are unless they are made flippantly and in the face of your God. I don't even ask that question anymore because it's superfluous anyway to our mission. And besides, every mistake you make gets you in some ways closer to your goal if you take it in the right manner. And this story, if I go through it right, will point out a few mistakes by some people very close to the top. But they were put there to make those mistakes because they were, in their minds, too smart to make them. We'll close down the mysteries by starting with Matthew, the 27th chapter, the first verse. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the first verse. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Yahshua to put him to death. What were the chief priests doing putting their master to death? Well, they were in Rome. You have that advice, bad advice in my opinion, but you're in the Rome, do like the Romans do. Bad advice, but Judas took it. Verse 2. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him on over to Pilate, the governor. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Yahshua was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. And throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. The guilt was so heavy on him, and somebody knew it would be. Observing him for his whole life, knew just the point at which the guilt was to be the strongest in his heart. And it was, and he hanged himself. Verse 6, but the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money. But who shed the blood? You're just increasing your, well, I'll get to that when I get to it. Verse 7, so they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. And that's some awful wine to Akeldama. If anybody has tried it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Verse 9. Then was filled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price on him, on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as Yahweh directed me. Now Yahshua stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Yahshua said, you have said so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release from the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. These people knew that they were always people in that crowd that came against them. But that was Rome they were coming against. The strongest army in the world at the time. One man or a few men at one time, they could let anybody go. Within a few weeks, they would be gone anyway, because the Roman soldiers would take them out at their leisure. Verse 16, and they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. What was his first name? Anybody? Whose whole name was Yahshua Barabbas, adding to the confusion among the believers in Judea. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want to release for you, Barabbas or Yahshua, who is called the Christ? For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up in the first place. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with this righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to destroy Yahshua. The governor again said to them, which one of these two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with Yahshua, who is called Christ? They all said, let him be crucified. And he said, why? What evil has he done? When they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's life and blood. See to it yourselves. And all the people answered. Note this answer and how it has borne out such blood over the centuries. And all the people answered, his blood be on us and on our children. I think about the big events like World War II and all the Jews that were slaughtered there, and all the ones that were slaughtered in other places, Ethiopia, for instance. Didn't know that there were Jews in Ethiopia, huh? And other places. 26. Then he released for them Barabbas. And the only reason that they wanted Barabbas released because he had already killed many Roman soldiers. And his other two accomplices were hanging right up there with Yahshua. And the only reason that they let him go because the people said to. They would have hung him too. But according to their rules, the people freed one guy every year. That was placation for them. This guy might free us all. That's what they wanted. But one guy isn't much against an army. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yahshua into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. Yeah. You wanted this guy here, now he's got backup from me. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the 28th verse. Continuing. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the 28th verse. And they stripped him. And put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head. And put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him temporarily, and led him away to crucify him. They stripped him first. When a prisoner was crucified, they were often nailed to the cross or stake naked, simply to humiliate them to the maximum effect. Yahshua hasn't been crucified yet, but humiliation had begun, and he was publicly stripped. Then they put a scarlet robe on him. Kings and rulers often wore scarlet because the dyes to make the fabrics this color were very expensive. And anybody that wore purple or red, they knew that they were somebody important. But to them, he wasn't, but he wore this scarlet robe for a little while. The scarlet robe was intended as cruel irony. Irony. Then they had twisted a crown of thorns. Kings wear crowns, but not crowns of torture. The specific thorn bushes of the region have long had hard, sharp thorns. This was a crown that cut, pierced, and bloodied the head of the king wearing it. The reed in his right hand. Kings hold scepters, but glorious, ornate scepters that symbolize their power. In their mockery of Yahshua, they gave him a scepter, but a thin, weak reed. Kind of like the thing that your grandma used to send you out to the yard for, to whip you. That switch. The switch, remember that? That's what this was. A switch. In place of a scepter. They knew how to put you in your place, huh? They bowed to the knee before him. Kings are honored. So they offered mock worship to this king. Hail, King of the Jews. Kings are greeted with royal titles. So in their spite, they mocked Yahshua with this title. It was meant to put down not only Yahshua, but also the Jews themselves, saying, this is the best king that you all could come up with. Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. They now shift from mockery to bare-knuckled cruelty. They seize the ironic scepter, take off the kingly robe, and begin to hurl spit and fists at the head of Yahshua, and led him away to be crucified, naked, not like they are pictured, covering up the naughty bits. They didn't even offer that comfort, as you see in the pictures. And I wouldn't think too much about that cross either. It was a stake. Continuing at verse 32. And they went out. They found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his stake. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull, they offered Yahshua wine to drink, mixed with gall. God only knows what that tasted like. Gall is, I defined it, but I won't repeat that here. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. That tells you something right there. And they had crucified him. They divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read this way: "This is Yahshua, the King of the Jews." The two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the son of Elohim, come down from the stake." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the king of Israel. Let him come down now from the stake, and we will believe him." You will anyway. But when we would love to see their faces when they come up in flesh from the dry bones prophecy, and come to realize that the only reason they are there in that fact is the fact that he didn't come down from that stake. Let that float around in your mind for a minute. The only reason they got that second chance, they never believed him in the first place. And he will give them one chance to do so in the same flesh that you're in now. Verse 43. He trusts in Elohim. Let Elohim deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, "I am the son of Elohim." And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. That was an act of stupidity. But one did get his way out of it. I don't have it in the script, but you all heard about one of them saying that he did repent while he was on the cross or stake. And many use that as proof that we go straight to heaven, but that wasn't what was said there. That one you'll have to read on your own. That's why I kind of left it out, but I just referred to it. Verse 45. Now, from the 6th hour, there was darkness over the land until the 9th hour. Imagine that. 12 noon, it goes black dark. There was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. 46. And about the 9th hour, Yahshua cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." That was not the language that many of them spoke. And many of them heard it from someone from Galilee, that they didn't understand that. That is, my Elohim, my Elohim. They saw it as something else. Why have you forsaken me? 47. And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, "This man is calling Elijah." No, that was another language that they weren't used to, people from Galilee speaking more than one language. He spoke at least 5. And they misunderstood him, saying, "This man is calling Elijah." And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filling it with sour wine, and putting it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." And Yahweh cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, now it gets interesting. If that's possible, after someone doing all of this, and they then crucified him. And Yahshua cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. That is a little bit impossible for a man to do. This curtain was 60 feet tall, and as thick as this top here. About that thick, that curtain was. That's pretty thick for one man to tear. And the average height of a man was like about here. And nobody was jumping that high. There was a reason why it tore from the top first and down. There was no mistake who tore it. None. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And if that wasn't enough, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the city, into the holy city, Jerusalem, and appeared to many. You can't kill all of them back. Those who had a mind to do so with Lazarus. You can't kill all of them back. Too many people saw this. And a person that is alive from the dead after being there for some amount of time, they didn't stink. None of that. But they were seen by their relatives or others that knew them. Coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Yahshua, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of Elohim." There were also many women there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Yahshua from Galilee, ministering to him. Among those were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. when it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Yahshua. He kept that on the down low side because of the power that the Pharisees and the scribes and the high priests had over all of the people in this part of Judea. Anybody that came to preach or follow the preaching of Yahshua, they would kick you out of the temple, and you had nowhere to go at that point. But most silently followed Yahshua on the QT, or the down low, just like Joseph of Arimathea did. 58. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Yahshua. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud. And even now, they have a copy of that shroud, they say. I don't even go into that very far because they haven't proven it with any veracity to anybody but the Catholic Church since then. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers." By now, he was not having any of this, and he had no part further in it. "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." This tells me that he was having some doubts about what he had done just then. The darkness, the bodies raising to life, and he was seeing all of that because anything that happened in his jurisdiction, somebody told him what happened. He knew all of this. And by now, he was having some doubts. He didn't say that because that would have kicked him out of that job. He was having some doubts. But he had done it. Doubt doesn't cleanse what you did. 66. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Our horse was gone by then. Too late. Continue at Luke, the 24th chapter, the 1st verse. Luke, the 24th chapter, the 1st verse. But on the first day of the week, remember how you calculate the weekdays. They begin and end at sunset. A lot of people read this and go on, this Sunday morning, no. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb already. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Master Yahshua. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise." These angels got it right. By now, a lot of people are saying that the Jewish custom of any part of a day being a whole day, now they're going back, a lot of people, to the Friday afternoon to early Sunday morning thing. Some people that I would have never thought to fall for that ruse, but people are falling for it now. Verse 8, and they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them who told them these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to be to them an idle tale. I-D-L-E. Some have that idle now. I-D-O-L. Some bad misprints of some Bibles. I've seen that in. But they seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves, and he went home marveling at what had happened. Continuing in Luke, the 24th chapter, the 13th verse. Luke, the 24th chapter, the 13th verse. That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all the things that had happened among them. Verse 15, while they were talking and discussing together, Yahshua himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. How did he do that? I don't know. One day I will, but not today. Verse 17, and he said to them, "What is this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. But one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Yahshua of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before Elohim and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him." The little guy always knows what happened, but doesn't always put himself in a position to talk about it. Like many of us now with this virus and things. Most people know what's happening, but they don't talk about it much. But in these days, he went to the right person. Verse 21, "But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things happened." That right there would put the lie to all those piece of days people, if they were not taking on some agenda of their own. The only thing that I could say is an agenda at this point was saving your physical life. Because anybody that is going to church on the right day in the last days is going to die for it. That's the only thing that they could possibly be doing, is going along to get along. But that's just me. Get back to this. This is much more reliable. Verse 22, "Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said." That was a big statement back then. Anything that the woman said back then, she had to prove it before any man believed it. Some still do that now. I'm not one of them. I was at one time, but not the same way. "24 again. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, 'O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?' And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them all the scriptures, the things concerning himself, so that they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, 'Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent.' Now he went in to stay with them, but he was at the table with them. He took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight." They said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" Which scriptures? The only thing that existed back then was the Old Testament. And where did he find himself in the Old Testament? That's something for another day. It's there. Plenty of evidence is there. (33) And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Master has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. As they were talking about these things, Yahshua himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace unto you." But they were startled and frightened and thought they saw a spirit. And he said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still disbelieved for joy and were marveling, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate before them. Then he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." But he opened their minds to understand the scriptures and said to them, "Thus it is written that the Christ should suffer, and," there it is again, "on the third day rise from the dead, and that repentance for the forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning where? Jerusalem." Where are the two witnesses going to come in the end time? That's all I got to say about that. 48. "You are witnesses of these things, and behold, I am sending you the promise of my Father upon you. But stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high." That will come on Pentecost. Verse 50. "And he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they worshiped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the temple blessing Elohim. And after his glorification with the Father, he finished some unfinished business with Peter." John, the 21st chapter and the first verse. "After this, Yahshua revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias." These people were just over the top and impressed with themselves. They named every river after a Caesar. The Sea of Tiberias. Sounds like some more folks. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "I will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as the day was breaking, Yahshua stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Yahshua. Yahshua said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast a net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Yahshua loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Master." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Master, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, and about 100 yards off. When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid on it, with bread. Yahshua said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have caught." So Simon Peter went aboard, and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish. Whenever you see a number in the Bible, look up that number. At the time, the number 153 was all of the brands of the kinds of fish on the earth at that time. And he was showing them something. Well, Peter anyway. 153 of them. Different kinds of fish. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. That in itself was a miracle. Yahshua said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Master. Yahshua came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Yahshua was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Yahshua said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." What he said to him, "Feed my lambs." You're going towards something here. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You tell me when you figure it out. He said to him the third time, I skipped something. Back to verse 16. He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Master, you know everything. You know that I love you. Yahshua said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show us that what kind of death he was to glorify Elohim with. After saying this, he said to me, follow me. Peter turned and said, the disciple whom Yahshua loved, following them. The one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Master, who is it that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Yahshua, Master, what about this man? Yahshua said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is it to you? You follow me. 153. Carry his word to all people, represented as fish in the whole world. Yahshua said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. That was his order. And if you go through the New Testament, that was all he cared about from that day forward. Peter. 23. So the saying spread around abroad among the brothers that the disciple was not to die. Yet Yahshua did not say to him that he would not die. But if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? A little bit different. This is the disciple who was bearing witness about these things and who has written these things. And we know that his testimony is true. Now, there are also many other things that Yahshua did, were even every one of them to be written. I suppose that the world itself could not contain all the books that would be written. But 153 fish, somebody else said at another time when his net broke, now you would be fishermen of men. Now it all links up. Any questions? Comments? Sarah?
Yes, I have a comment on starting at verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
When he says, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep,
Mm-hmm.
and feed my sheep.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about lambs and sheep, lambs are the baby,
Yeah.
right? The baby sheep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was this the significance for spiritual
Yes.
disciples? Okay, so those who are drinking the milk are the lambs.
Mm-hmm.
Taking care of the sheep are
Older ones.
the older ones who are
Yep.
possibly eating meat they don't need to be fed. And then
Yes.
the feeding my sheep are the, are,
Everybody else.
yes, that was deep.
He covered everybody.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Yeah, I'd never noticed that before, yeah.
Yep. And he did it in different languages. It doesn't bear itself out there, but every time he said it, he did it in a different language and covered everybody. The first time was in Hebrew. The second time I was in Aramaic. And one more language, I think it was Greek, but I don't know for sure. And over the years, the Bibles have been less and less clear about that point. Ruby.
The word struck me so hard, and it pierced me when it said, Yahshua would say, "What's it to you?" I think of what I go through with my family members, of how they were once in the belief and now they're not. Should I just continue praying and not even make any comments or suggestions? Because it's not for me to figure it out where they're at, that I should just...
They don't even know where they are at this point.
So I should just...
Once you walk away from the truth, it's hard to get in anywhere else because it all falls strange on your ears.
Right, because it said right here, follow me. Kept on saying, what's it to you? Just follow me. My goodness, it just got to me. Like the Father saying to me, stop it, Ruby, just follow me. Forget them. They knew, they know, but they choose to be where they're at. That's how I took it, and I kept on reading it, and it pierced me. Because I really can't do anything about them. No matter how much you love your family members, we just got to say, I used to say, well, let me read this verse to them. What's it to me?
They've already read it.
It's none of my business anymore.
They've already read it. It didn't touch them because now they're polluted by other stuff along with it, and it has diluted itself in their minds. Thurman.
Pastor, I was looking at the point in Luke chapter 24, after the women had went to the tomb and they came to, bear word to the apostles, that was to the apostles and they did not believe the women. I guess maybe because you said that traditionally that the men wouldn't believe a woman unless she proved it, maybe that was the cause. But on the road to Emmaus, the two disciples that were speaking with Christ, they didn't make mention to Christ that the apostles didn't believe when they were talking to him, when he had asked them what went down. They didn't mention the apostles' unbelief. They left that out. And I just thought that was interesting. So they didn't paint themselves in a bad light, so to speak. Yeah, they left out a little bit of crucial information.
He knew it already anyway.
This is deep.
Sherry.
Pastor, Matthew 27 and 50. When Yahshua gave up the ghost, and as you were speaking about that veil, which is so very, very huge and big, and a human being cannot tear that down. But the other part that was so amazingly, that I can't even begin to wrap my mind around it. 27 and 52, where it says the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and their loved ones saw them, and they came out of the graves in his resurrection, and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Just to, it is so hard
do
to
away
wrap,
with that.
Right. To
historically.
To wrap your mind
They haven't been able
that.
to yet.
To wrap your mind around that, and they saw that. And as you said, Pilate, he began to think, what did I do? For this was the Son of
That was proof of the feeling about women. His wife told him, have nothing to do with this man.
Yes. Yes, he did. She had troubling dreams. Thank you, David.
Have nothing to do with this innocent man. Yes.
When you talk about
Thomas doubting, didn't all the disciples doubt?
Yes.
Yeah, they all did, but they just brought out the fact that Thomas, did, but they all doubted if he was truly who he said he was. And the fact that you walk with this man each and every day and you're healing and you see him healing, how can you even question? If we had him right here with us, how amazing would that be? But they were still doubting him every step of the way.
That's going to be the real problem in the end times here, when people start dying for their religion. And other people that haven't come to that point yet, and the knife points at you, what will you do? And everybody has their own answer. And you look deep enough in yourself, and you don't have that answer yet for certain yourself, really. But if you put forth the wrong one, you don't get another chance. Molina.
There's a scripture that, Ruby, about your people who have left the church. It's in Hebrews, the 6th chapter, where it says in verse 44, it is impossible in the case of those who have once been enlightened, who have tasted the heavenly gift and have shared in the Holy Spirit and have tasted the goodness of the Word of God and the powers of the age to come, and have fallen away, to restore them again to repentance, since that would be crucifying once again the Son of God to their own harm and holding him up in contempt. But they said once it's impossible to restore them. The 6th chapter, beginning in verse 4.
I wanted to piggyback on what Pastor said. He said, what if somebody had a knife up to you, which you claim to know who the Father is? But take it even deeper, especially with a woman, if they put it up to their child, because we would die for our children. So how would we react if someone was trying to kill our child? That's the question. Because, yeah. But look at Abraham. Look what Abraham did with Isaac.
It can be done, but you got to have faith to do that. And everybody, I can't sit here and say I know who was going to do what, and including myself. That's the key. His faith. The key is the faith.
He said, we will be back.
He said, me and the lab will be back, or me and my son will be back.
He said, the lab.
And you know what? Even with Isaac, when I read when Isaac was laid out, he never screamed or said, Daddy, don't. He followed. He was obedient because he trusted and believed himself. That's really big.
Both fathers.
Thank you, baby.
His earthly father and his heavenly father. He trusted both. Mm-hmm.
He even said, where's the ram, Dad?
Develop.
The 153 fish, what? You said that represents
The brands of fish that were on the earth at that time. There are more now.
that represents the people?
Yes.
The different.
The fish in that case, he had already told Peter that you don't need your net anymore. Now you're going to fish for men. There are many more brands now. And at that point, there were only 153. I don't even guess how many now. But every Bible study I have ever been into never has that subject ever come up. And anything that is there that big, there's something to it. And I looked into it. And
I never heard
Mhm.
it. You and Nike every opportunity we get. Lord, we praise him. We praise him.
this is not something that I wanted to do, but every time I veered from it a little bit, something pops up to get me back to that whole idea of reading the whole books at once. I'm refining how I do it, because a lot of it takes a lot of time, but it comes in little pieces, and little things jump out at you that in the way that we used to do it, that's the only thing you taught, but had no other way to do it than that way. But this way, it comes at you from different angles, and you look at it a little bit differently and deeply. Mom.
You know, as you're talking about the crown of thorns, you can't imagine, how it felt. But I did have a plant my mom gave me years ago, and I don't want that, David. When I came here to Chicago, it was a beautiful plant, and it did have flowers. But the thorns were just as the book described them. And you said, oh my goodness sake, and then, they had put it on him, on his hands. But the plant is really, it's just like the book said it is. That's what the plant is.
Yep. I was reading somewhere a long time ago that the original thorns that came on a rose, the first thorns that were produced, they did not have thorns. That's something that came with Satan putting his hands where they weren't supposed to be. Ruby.
Regarding the crown of thorns, if you think about it, even when you're trying to make a wreath, it takes months to prepare. Could it have been that they were preparing for this moment a long time ago, that they had to make that thorn a wreath? Because it had to be...
No, they had hundreds of them. Anybody that they crucified, they crowned with that. If they had declared themselves some kind of king.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
They had them already prepared. Melina.
The way that the Romans killed people when they did something wrong.
Yeah, they left the body on the hillside as like, this is what happens to you when you would go against
they had them lined up on the side of the road to show us, if you do something wrong, this is what's going to happen to you.
That was very rare, however, that they had only 3. But some books have hundreds of them. I don't find any evidence of that in the Bible, but it is evidenced in the history of Rome. They had sometimes hundreds at one time that they killed. Yeah. They made these crowns of thorns ahead of time. That wasn't special for him. They banged it on there for maximum effect. Maximum effect. And a lot of times, those thorns were so sharp that some of the scalp came up with them.
Yeah, they're very sharp. They're like knives.
You couldn't walk by them, they'd reach out and grab you and just bloody your arm. And pour them out. I've had enough of these.
Melina.
One of the things about Joseph of Arimathea in the Bible, when I was reading about the history, back in the history time, you could not claim a body unless you were a relative of someone who had died. So he was related to Christ. I think it was through Mary. He was
Yes.
related because no one can claim a dead body unless they were a relative. So he's probably
Yep.
Christ's uncle.
There's so much stuff that we were not told. A lot of it was not chicanery, but lack of skill in dividing that word at that time. And a lot of people, they did this for that reason or that reason. No. Sometimes it's just not knowing what to do. I've learned that in my own studies and some things. The most basic one that I can think of that exemplifies that is the word, I can't think of it right now, but I can't think of it right now. I'll save that for another sermon. But every time I would hear that word, and I would think something else, and I can't think of it right now. For some reason, it's blocked. Anyone else? Anybody else hungry? Good one.